Hello Internet and welcome back to Scared Schmidtless, the true crime and horror podcast hosted by yours truly, Alexander Schmidt. Hence the very clever name, I believe, the very clever podcast title. I hope you've been doing well this week. I've been researching the past hour for today's episode, and I honestly would just like to say before we get into it, if you have a weak stomach, I would probably highly advise that you skip this episode, maybe go do something else. If you have got a weak stomach and you're not into, some real disturbing shit, I'm not saying I am, I just find it interesting. Maybe skip this, because this one is pretty sickening, to be honest. It's in line with the David Parker Ray episode that I did ages ago, where I read out the tapes, and it just left me feeling really unsettled and quite uneasy is a good way of putting it. So, you know what? This episode may just be titled, "This One's a Little Bit Fucked." Because it is. This one is very fucked. And before we get right into it, I'd just like to quickly credit the people that I'm using these articles and stories from. So we have allthat'sinteresting.com, and the writer is William D. Long. And then we have a story from Daily Mail, and the writer for that one is Will Stewart. We're going to start off right away with the article from allthat'sinteresting.com by William D. Long, titled Anatoly Moskvin's Parents Thought He Collected Vintage Dolls. They were really young mummified girls. Now, if that doesn't give you a red flag straight away, that you have a weak stomach, might want to get that checked, because as soon as I read this years ago, I felt very, very sick, especially considering the context of how this happened and how childhood trauma can lead into adulthood and affect essentially your adult life. So let's get straight into it. This article was published on February 11th, 2019. Anatoly Moskvin's parents thought he collected vintage dolls. They were really young mummified girls. Also, these articles have images attached. If you are struggling to listen to the audio of this, I really, really don't recommend you search up either the Russian Doll Man or Anatoly Moskvin. This stuff is like pure nightmare fuel. And one of the images is a very famous one that has, I think, honestly stuck with me since I originally read it. Anatoly Moskvin loved history. I'm just going to refer to him as Anatoly, because I feel like I'm going to keep fucking up Moskvin. Anatoly Moskvin loved history. He spoke 13 languages, travelled extensively, taught at the college level, and was a journalist in Nizhny Novgorod. See, this is why I don't know anything about Russia. This is pronounced Nizhny Novgorod. I feel like I've just cursed myself. Russia's 5th largest city. Moskvin was also a self-proclaimed expert on cemeteries and dubbed himself a necropolist. One colleague called his work priceless. Too bad Moskvin took his expertise to unhealthy new levels. In 2011, the historian was arrested after the bodies of 29 girls between the ages of 3 and 25 were found mummified in his apartment. Anatoly Moskvin, okay, I think I've got it under wraps now, I think I have his name down pat, was known as the ultimate expert on cemeteries in his city of Novgorod, Russia. He attributes his obsession with the macabre to a 1979 incident when the historian was only 13. Moskvin shared this story in Necrologies, a weekly publication dedicated to cemeteries and obituaries, to which he was an avid contributor. In his last article for the publication, dated October 26, 2011, Moskvin divulged how a group of men in black suits stopped him on the way home from school. They were en route to the funeral of an 11-year-old Natasha Petrova and dragged young Anatoly along to her coffin, where they forced him to kiss the girl's corpse. Moskvin wrote, "I kissed her once, then again, and then again. The girl's grieving mother then put a wedding ring on Anatoly's finger and a wedding ring on her dead daughter's finger." That is fucked. See, some of this I haven't fully read into. I've just gotten the bits that interested me, but I did not know that. That is... What the fuck? How you're going to traumatize a kid like that? Holy fuck. This kid was just attending a funeral, and he was forced to kiss this dead girl's head 3 times, and then the mother puts a wedding ring on his finger and then the dead daughter's finger? Yikes. No that's fucked. That's why I'm going to title this, probably, "This one's a little fucked." My strange marriage with Natasha Petrova was useful. Okay. Okay. Moskvin said in the article, "Strange indeed. He said it led to a belief in magic and ultimately a fascination with the dead. Whether the story is even true is beside the point by now, as his disturbing thoughts would go unchecked for more than 30 years. Anatoly Moskvin's interest in the corpse-killing incident never abated. He began to wander through cemeteries as a schoolboy. His interest even formed his studies, and Moskvin eventually earned an advanced degree in Celtic studies, a culture whose mythology often blurs the lines between life and death. The historian also mastered some 13 languages and was a many times published scholar. Meanwhile, Moskvin roamed from cemetery to cemetery. I don't think anyone in the city knows them better than I do," he said of his extensive knowledge of the region's dead. From 2005 to 2007, Moskvin claimed to have visited 752 cemeteries in Novgorod. He took detailed notes on each one and delved into the histories of those buried there. The hands-on historian claimed to have walked up to 20 miles per day, sometimes sleeping on hay bales and drinking rainwater from puddles. Moskvin posted a documentary series of his travels and discoveries entitled "Great Walks Around Cemeteries" and "What the Dead Said." These continue to be published in a weekly newspaper. He even said he spent one night sleeping in a coffin ahead of a deceased person's funerals. His observations were more than just observations, however. In 2009, locals began to discover the graves of their loved ones desecrated, sometimes completely dug up. Russian Interior Ministry spokesman General Valery Krebakin told CNN that initially our leading theory was that it was done by some extremist organizations. We decided to beef up our police units and set up groups composed of our most experienced detectives who specialize in extremist crimes. But for nearly 2 years, the Interior Ministry's leads went nowhere. Graves continued to be desecrated and no one knew why. Then, a break in the investigation came following a terrorist attack at the airport in Moscow in 2011. Shortly afterward, authorities heard reports of Muslim graves being desecrated in Novgorod. Investigators were led to a cemetery where someone was painting over the pictures of dead Muslims, but not damaging anything else. This was where Moskvin was finally caught. 8 police officers went to his apartment after they apprehended him at the graves of the Muslims to gather evidence. What they found there shocked them all. Inside, authorities found life-size doll-like figures throughout the apartment. The figures resembled antique dolls. They wore fine and varied clothing. Some wore knee-high boots, others had makeup on over faces Moskvin had covered in fabric. He had also hidden their hands in fabric. Except these were not dolls. They were the mummified corpses of human girls. There's actually footage attached to this article, and there's footage you can find on YouTube of the police actually going into his apartment or his parents' apartment and finding these mummified corpses. And the creepiest thing at first, right, is they're scattered throughout the house. And what's worse is the fact that the investigators who were there, or the police officers, at first didn't recognize that they were mummified corpses and just thought they were dolls, that the dude had a fascination with dolls and made like human-sized dolls. they didn't realize that inside those dolls were dead bodies. When police moved one of the bodies, it played music, as if on cue. Inside the chests of many of the dolls, Moskvin had embedded music boxes. There were also photographs and plaques taken off of the gravestones, doll-making manuals, and maps of local cemeteries strewn about the apartment. Police even discovered that the clothes worn by the mummified corpses were the clothes in which they were buried. Investigators later found music boxes or toys inside the bodies of the dead girls, so that they could produce sounds when Moskvin touched them. There were also personal belongings and clothing inside some of the mummies. One mummy had a piece of her own gravestone with her name scrawled on it inside her body. Another one contained a hospital tag with the date and the cause of the girl's death. A dried human heart was found inside a third body. Moskvin admitted that he would stuff the decayed corpses with rags. Then he would wrap nylon tights around their faces or fashion doll faces onto them. He would also insert buttons or toy eyes into the girls' eye sockets so that they could watch cartoons with him. Oh, okay. I need a drink. The historian said that he mostly loved these girls, though they're not his girls. What the fuck? They're not his property. Anyways, the historian said that he mostly loved his girls, though there were a few dolls in his garage which he claimed to have grown to dislike. He said he dug up the graves of girls because he was lonely. He said he was single and his biggest dream was to have children. Russian adoption agencies wouldn't let Moskvin adopt a child because he didn't make enough money. Perhaps that was for the best, judging by the condition of his pack-rat apartment and psychotic obsessions with dead people. Moskvin added that he had done what he did because he was waiting for science to find a way to bring the dead back to life. In the meantime, he used a simple solution of salt and baking soda to preserve the girls. He celebrated the birthdays of his dolls as if they were his own children. Moskvin's parents claimed to know nothing of the true origin of Moskvin's dolls. That is a fucking load of baloney. What a load of bullshit. The parents had to know something, surely. The dude had 29 corpses in around the house. What about the smell? Wouldn't there have been a smell? Though the mum in the photo they've attached looks like the type of mum that, even though the son had all these corpses in the house, say she found out, right? She would have gone, oh, at least you didn't admit that you were gay. Like, what? It doesn't look like she'd have a problem with it. They would have had to have known, surely. Okay, here's a quote from Elvira, the mum. Elvira, the professor's then 76-year-old mum, said, we saw these dolls, but we did not suspect they were dead bodies inside. We thought it was his hobby to make such big dolls and did not We thought it was his hobby to make such big dolls and did not see anything wrong with it. That's not true. They had some ideas, surely. They just didn't want to tell the police so then they weren't robbed of their son. Shoes in Moskvin's apartment matched footprints found near desecrated graves, and police knew without a doubt that they had their grave robber. Just to go with this discovery, attached to this article is probably one of the most famous photos from this case, and it's of this girl who people say is the creepiest mummified corpse out of the lot. I couldn't find the girl's name, but the picture here has the girl in a pink outfit, which is even creepier finding out that they were the clothes that they were buried in. He just mummified them the way they were. A completely pale face, which obviously is wax. Her eyes got false eyelashes on there. It looks like a button of some sort in her eyes. Her lips have lipstick applied to them and also look quite large. It's genuinely a very, very creepy photo. Knowing like a centimeter under that wax is the dead body of a young girl. the photo is genuinely creepy to look at. It gives off a really like sinister vibe. They've attached like a photo of the actual girl, but haven't put the name there. But the actual girl has the exact same nose as the one, the corpse. Neighbours were shocked. They said that the renowned historian was quiet and that Moskvin's parents were nice people. Sure, a rancid smell emanated from his apartment whenever he opened the door, but a neighbour chalked that up to the stink of something that rots in the basements of all the local buildings. Moskvin's editor at Necrologies, Alexei Yesin, didn't think anything of his writer's eccentricities. Many of his articles enlighten his sensual interest in deceased young women, which I took for romantic and somewhat childish fantasies the talented writer emphasized. He described the historian to have quirks, but would not have imagined that one such quirk included the mummification of 29 young women and girls. In court, Moskvin confessed to 44 counts of abusing graves and dead bodies. He said to the victims' parents, "You abandoned your girls, I brought them home and warmed them up." Moskvin was diagnosed with schizophrenia and sentenced to time in a psychiatric ward following his sentencing. Though as of September 2008, he was faced with the opportunity to continue psychiatric treatment in his home. The victims' families think otherwise. I fully agree with that. I do not think he should be in public at all. Natalia Chardimova, the mother of Moskvin's first victim, believes Moskvin should stay locked up for the rest of his life. "This creature brought fear, terror, and panic into my life. I shudder to think that he will have freedom to go where he wants. Neither my family nor the families of other victims will be able to sleep peacefully. He needs to be kept under surveillance. I insist on a life sentence, only under medical supervision, without the right of free movement." Local prosecutors agree with Chardimova's assessment, even though psychiatrists say Moskvin, now in his early 50s, is improving. Since Anatoly's prosecution, several of Moskvin's colleagues quit their collaborations with him. His parents live in utter isolation as their community ostracizes them, so the community hates them, obviously. Elvira suggested that she and her husband perhaps just kill themselves, but her husband refused. Both are in an unhealthy condition. Moskvin allegedly told authorities to not bother reburying the girls too deeply, as he will simply unbury them when he is released. See, and that is exactly why that man should not be released again. I still find it hard to grasp the scale of his sickening work, but for 9 years he was living with my mummified daughter in his bedroom, Chardimova continued. And this quote, I wish I could end the episode on this quote, but I have another article. This quote goes, "I had her for 10 years, he had her for 9. Whew. As if that doesn't just send a chill down your back. And this brings us to the most recent article I could find, courtesy of the Daily Mail Australia news organisation. So Australia represent, I guess. And this article was written by Will Stewart, which I credited at the start, and the title is "Russian Grave Robber Who Was Locked Up for Stealing 29 Girls' Corpses for His Doll Collection Refuses to Apologise to the Parents as He Appeals for Release. So he can move in with his new girlfriend." A historian who robbed the graves of 29 young girls and lived with the mummified corpses has refused to apologise to their parents. It comes as he appeals to be released from psychiatric hospital so he can go and live with his new girlfriend. Anatoly Moskvin, 53, from Novgorod, Russia, turned the dead children into dolls, dressing them in stockings, clothes, and knee-length boots. He applied lipstick and makeup to their faces. The grave robber has refused to apologize to his victim's parents as he attended a custody hearing amid his efforts to be released from psychiatric hospital to care for his elderly mother and live with his new girlfriend. "These girls are girls," he said. "There are no parents in my view. I don't know any of them. Besides, they buried their daughters, and this is where I believe their rights over them finished." And there's just this photo here of a head with just wax on it, and you can see the human teeth. That is, I do not like that at all. Anatoly then went on to say, following that statement, "So no, I would not apologize." Moskvin also said he wanted to become a teacher of English to children after an initiative by Vladimir Putin to boost foreign languages in schools. Dude, you are never going to be a school teacher in your life. You should stay in prison. That's a chilling detail that was left out of the other article. Her mother, Natalia Chardimova, so the mother that I spoke about earlier, did not realize that on her regular visits to her daughter's graveside, the coffin was empty. She has also called for him to be permanently locked up. "I would be happy to know he will spend his life in the hospital. He's a sick person. From one side, it's not good to be happy about this, but it will give me the chance to put a gravestone on the plot of my daughter. She was buried unnamed to prevent him finding her grave again if he is ever released." Anatoly's mother also said to the court that the court was biased against her son, who was not able to be in society, work, or get married. Wow. Imagine being like that fucking stupid. Really? Do you have any idea how wrong what he did was? I understand he's your son and that probably hurts that he's in hospital or whatever, but motherfucker, look at what your son did! Holy fuck! Court's biased against my son. Shut up. I think this case is a really good insight into how some childhood trauma affects adults later on in life. Obviously, with Anatoly being forced to kiss that girl, the dead girl, that would obviously cause a lot of problems. I'm not trying to justify this man at all. This man deserves to be in captivity or whatever for the rest of his life. He deserves to die in prison, whatever like that. But I think this story is a really good insight into how childhood trauma can affect a person later on in adulthood. Childhood trauma doesn't really go away, and look, I've had experiences myself, but I would never do something like that. You know what I mean? I'm saying you know what I mean. I'm fucking talking to myself. That story was a bit sickening. I'll be honest. The photos are what really makes this story quite unsettling. Just knowing that underneath that little layer of wax, there's a young girl under there. It's it's not a good one. Not a good one. So I'm going to leave the episode there today. If you enjoyed it, please do leave a positive review if you enjoyed the show, and reach out to the show if you want to. If you want to send a story into the show, or you have an experience yourself you want to share, whether it's true crime or horror-related, creepy encounters, whatever like that, the email you can send that to is scaredschmidtlesspod@gmail.com, or just have a browse in the show notes. I've included all of it there. I also have a Twitter and Instagram that I post on if you want to follow those as well. Yeah. Thank you all for listening in. I will most likely be back next week. And yeah, I would like to just say, stay safe.